Hello, this is Only One Kenobi here, Only One, and I'm just doing a video now on a few background characters I think could become vintage collection characters, and I shall explain why in this movie. In this video. God, it's not a movie. But anyway, speaking of movies, that's why I've got movie on the brain, because this guy was in the very first ever Star Wars movie, which was A New Hope in 1977. Now, New Hope was released about 3 years before I was even born, but I do remember watching Star Wars, probably one of the first films I ever saw, in the mid-80s, and this guy always stood out to me, because he was part of the briefing room, he was sat around that table, and he had his own individuality because he is wearing white. Now, there's not many characters since then who've ever worn white, really, but he was one of them. I'm going to show you the figure. This is from the Saga Collection Death Star briefing room set. There's about 7, maybe 8 figures in that set, I don't know. I'm glad I got it when I did, because they go for a fortune now on eBay. I got it for about £30. I've seen them go for 70, 80, 90 pounds. But anyway, he was part of them, and he has his own individuality. As I say, he wears white. He's the only one who is wearing white. Since then, there have been a few more characters who wear white. Number 1, Grand Admiral Thrawn. He's a very popular expanded universe character. And then, of course, Director Krennic. Now, that's the reason why I like Director Krennic so much. I thought the actor Ben Mendelsohn, I think his name was, I apologise if I've got that wrong, but I loved Krennic. I thought he did a good job, and it just reminded me of this fella, because he also wore white, if you know what I mean. There's not many who do. It's always good to have Imperials, by the way, with a bit of individuality, because when it comes to figures, a bit like Rebel pilots, Imperials can look quite samey, especially if they are like Admiral Piet, and there was a figure for him, wasn't there, a while ago, and Captain Needham and Moff Jared. I've mentioned those two before. I never bought them as figures because I can't differentiate between them. There's nothing about them. They just have a cap and a face that's very generic. Whereas this guy here, he is different. He's wearing white, and he's got his own little moustache and everything, a bit like Admiral Ozzel. And Tarkin, of course, he's got his own individuality. But anyway, let's talk about this guy. This was a great figure that came out in the Saga collection, and he goes very nicely. Imperial don't do much, but he goes very nicely just on display, standing in a cluster. But I do like this character. I'm really interested about him. Not to mention the fact that he has now been expanded himself. They've given more to this character by bringing him out, or he was inside, I'm sorry, he was a part of the Clone Wars. So here he was in the Clone Wars, where he was Admiral Yularen. Now, I saw the Clone Wars in about 2009. It was released the year before that, I believe, and it was on this DVD here. Now, Admiral Yularen, or Wullf Yularen is his full name, was part of the Clone Wars. Now, as far as I know, he wasn't necessarily like an evil character, you know, like, say, Tarkin's got a little bit of a nasty side to him, hasn't he? But Yularen was just somebody who just did his job. He looked like he was very good at his job. He was in the Navy. He worked well alongside the clones and the Jedi generals like Anakin and Kenobi, of course. But that sort of led me to feel very sorry for him. It was some years later that I realised that they actually amalgamated the two people. The guy who was in the Clone Wars was supposed to be this fella who was sat in the background in the briefing room. Now, back in the 70s, Lucas would have given him the job to just sit there. He was just an extra. Although there was something about him, like I say, when I saw him as a kid, I thought, wow, who is he? He looks like he could be, to quote C-3PO, a person of some importance, I presume. But I do feel sorry for this guy now, because by all accounts, he'd come out of retirement to start working for the Empire again. Now, anyone who was part of the Republic, like he was undoubtedly going to get swept into the Empire. Now, as far as I remember, he wasn't necessarily an evil person in this, but I don't know how his story flushed out, but as far as I was concerned, he was just somebody doing a good job, or very good at his job in the Imperial Navy. So the fact that he died was just very bad luck, because he'd come out of retirement and he was on the Death Star when it blew, by all accounts. So there you go. I feel quite sorry for him. But I was going to say about background characters and the fact that he has become something now. He has become something via the Clone Wars. And, you know, who gets to be on a vintage cardback? Well, it's a bit like Rolling Stone magazine, if you could put it like that. You don't get on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, or you haven't made it until you get on the front cover. Now, you haven't made it until you've been a vintage collection cardback. Now, this guy is a background character. In fact, he doesn't do anything. I mean, you blink and you miss him. You might have some stories in comics or whatever, but if he can be a vintage cardback, so can he. And I just feel that he deserves a little bit of a tribute or a respect to mark the fact that he has become more than just an extra. He is Colonel Wullf Yularen. He plays a part in the Clone Wars, and he also died or perished on the Death Star. And I just think he's quite interesting, really, for all the reasons I've mentioned just previously in the video. And as far as the figure's concerned, that's what I like about it as well. He's got a bit of individuality, unlike Nida and Jared. And we only have one Imperial on a vintage card back. Imperial officer, I mean. Or someone was part of the Imperial Navy, yada yada. And that is Tarkin, so why not make it Yularen? And why have I got this image up, by the way? Well, what better image to have on the card back? Because all vintage card backs have a photograph, a stock photograph from the movie. Well, that would be perfect, wouldn't it? This has been Only One Kenobi. Only one. Out.